And here we go. Hi, everybody at the What's on the Elephant Castle Facebook community. I'm Nick from Retribe, and joining me today, I'm going to get the name right, Rachel Lindley Love. A Canadian sounding person, however, has deep roots here in the UK, and I'm really excited to be able to talk to her today. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Nick.
How are you doing? Can you introduce yourself to the community?
I absolutely can. Gosh, where should we begin? What did I have for breakfast, maybe? No, kidding. Well, I was born and raised in the UK, in South Wales, actually, is where I started. Left when I was 5, moved all around England, moved to India for 3 years, came back to the UK, and then shuttled off to Canada and stayed in Toronto for 30 years. Married a Canadian, had a Canadian kid. They're both with me. Adjusting to British life. I've had a very, very interesting existence, especially in the last few years. So much so that I wrote a book about it. My husband's life almost came to an end, and mine hung in the balance. And we went through an unbelievable extreme amount of stress for a very prolonged period of time. And to be perfectly honest with you, Nick, this is going to sound so trite, but truly, it was probably the biggest gift that I've ever received. Now that's, of course, looking back, right? Because it started in 2019. And it went on for such a length of time. But when you are really up against your mortality, you get a totally different lens on life, right? I mean, crisis will bring you to your knees, but if you can figure out how to get up, are we allowed to swear, or is there no swearing?
Yeah. Sometimes they fall out, but that's
That's a Canadian face, everybody. That's like, I really prefer you didn't. No swear zone. Anyway.
No swear, but if it pops out, it's okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Permission granted. No, a lot of stuff happened. And it was truly life-changing. And it wasn't the first crisis that I've lived through, but the crisis I lived through prior to that was an amazing training ground, because that's something that I carried with me for the next decade of my life. And I didn't want to do that again, because I had felt and lived the way that particular trauma had impacted me. And I was like, that's it. We are not doing this anymore. I've got to figure out a better way to live through these experiences and change my perspective, change my mindset, change my victimhood, change everything. And we did change everything. We ended up selling everything and moving overseas, and it was crazy. So anyway, that's why I wrote the book. Small sidebar, if you see me starting to glow red, this is menopause, everybody. This is what it looks like. So if you don't mind, I'll turn the fan on periodically. If the sound is awful, just let me know. Just one moment, please. I have medical menopause, but the truth is I'm totally old enough to actually be going through it. I just like to say medical menopause because it is true, but.
Bless, thank you so much, Rachel, for introducing yourself. There's so much that we can talk about. I'm interested to know about the first crisis, but I'm also interested to know what it was like, growing up and moving around so much. It's really interesting to know, like, for me, I moved to the UK when I was 18. I moved back to North America in 2000, just when I was 30. I moved around a lot. I had a hard time putting roots down. And a lot of people thought it was, it sounded cool to move around a lot, but I'm just wondering, where did you kind of place your identity? Where did you feel your roots were? And even if you did, and did they impact kind of the image that you wanted to put on and the different personas that you could have?
You know, that question can only come from somebody who has done that, lived through that process of moving around a lot, because it does make you question your identity. And identity is so tied into where we come from geographically, right? Our physical roots contribute so much to who we are, how we behave, our cultural and societal influences. So, you know, there was a time when all this moving around had left me feeling unrooted, unanchored, like I never belonged anywhere. It made me, it was a cornerstone into why I became such a chronic people pleaser. I'm a recovering people pleaser now. And because I always wanted to fit in, and I was always the new kid. And that was hard, especially when you're doing it every few years. I mean, I went to 9 schools and lived on 3 continents, and I've had probably close to 40 odd moves. I've lost track. So the downside was definitely this feeling of really wanting to fit. And I still, you know, you and I are the same age, I'm 51, and I still find myself looking at groups of friends and thinking, I wish I had that. I wish I had that history with people. And I wish that they would invite me, you know, to their little girls' weekends or their, but I'm sort of, I always think of myself as an afterthought for them. And so that is sad. I mean, it chokes me up just a little bit now. You know, there's still that feeling of the kid that was left out. And I don't know that that will ever leave me. But what it gave me was some magic, because it made me extraordinarily adaptable. I can be at home in any situation. There is yet to be a circumstance where I could not make friends. I can be by myself. I can be in a crowd. I can be in almost any country and feel comfortable, a sense of ease, knowing that I've adapted so many times before, knowing that I'm resilient in that regard. So it has made me extremely adaptable. It's also given me the gift of acute sensitivity to, and I'm acutely sensitive anyway, but in terms of anybody who's new to a neighborhood or new to a situation, my first instinct is to want to welcome them and make them comfortable, because I know how hard that can be, sitting on the outside of a circle of friends, right? I know how much it means to just have a hand extended and somebody to look you in the eye and say, you're welcome here. You belong here. I've just been, can I give you a little sidebar here? I've just been reading, so Brene Brown is one of my favorite authors. She's I'm sure you're familiar, you're nodding your head, you know who Brene Brown is. She wrote this amazing book called Atlas of the Heart. And she talks about the difference between belonging and fitting in. I always wanted to fit in as a child and as a young adult. You don't want to stick out in that your developing phases of life. You want to fit in. And what I did was I sacrificed who I was in order to fit in. And Brene Brown writes about, you don't actually want to fit in, you want to belong. And when I read that, I was like, yes, I want to belong, damn it. I just want to belong. But here's the thing also that I've learned from that process. Belonging means you have to have the balls to be authentic. Because belonging is being accepted entirely for who you are. And when you're wired to fit in and just do like everybody else is doing, or you think how everybody else is fitting in, when you sacrifice your own values in favor of fitting in, you lose your authenticity. So I think it takes a while, honestly, Nick, to get that back. if you're wired one way, it takes experience and it takes aging. I love being the age that I am. I'm not so thrilled about the way my eyelids are sagging, but whatever. You know what I mean? I love the fact that with age, you're 71, baby, and so am I, right? We're very close in age. And there's, I don't know if you'll agree, but I think you will, that there is something sort of sublime about it. We just get more and more like ourselves.
I agree. I think that you start to understand, who you are a little bit more. And it's really only been in the last few years that I've been able to kind of really engage with that journey of finding out my authentic self. But as you were speaking, the words that came to mind were, you talked about being sensitive and you talked about being a people pleaser. And those are things that I can really relate to. And I'm wondering, as I read people like Brené Brown and Dr. Gabor Mate and the book, The Body Keeps the Score, and how as a young person, even in the womb, we can experience things happening to us that affect us on a cellular level that can create very sensitive creatures that seek love and seek attention. And so when I thought that people pleasing was actually a trait of mine that was really nice, I like to please people, I actually discovered it was a coping mechanism for trauma. And it actually was, in a way, quite a selfish activity, because I was seeking love, attention, affection, because I was so sensitive. And I think that it's really interesting that you talk about being sensitive and a people pleaser. And I'm wondering, when did the people pleasing start manifesting itself in your life? And now you say that you recovered in that. What's been that journey for you around people pleasing?
Good question. I think people pleasing was something that I did so innately that there was no arrival point. It was just an organic expression, because my mother comes from some pretty extreme trauma. And she had me very young. And she is my soulmate. I mean, she's an incredible human being. And she came out of her family with some major deficits. And therefore, because she was lacking, she couldn't give, what's the word? She came from struggle. She tried to not impose that. Obviously, she is an incredibly loving, caring, amazing human. And she was damaged and broken. And she had emotional trauma that she was dealing with. Now, as a very sensitive child who's picking up on that, who's reading that and wanting my mom to be well and better, the automatic default button for me was to take care of her, not in a way that she ever asked me to. It was just my response because of how we were both coming together in that relationship. Does that make sense? So that started young for me. That started when she had a nervous breakdown, and at 2, I was assuring her that it would be okay. That never left. And that also taught me that I was needed. And if I was needed, then I was loved. And that carried on into dysfunctional relationships over and over and over, because I had this rescuer problem, right? If I can rescue you, you're going to need me. And that equates to love for me. So a lot of my relationships were based on, I'm going to help you. But as you say, it was selfish. Not in a conscious way, but in the way that was just dysfunctional. When I was 21, I was making $7 an hour. And I thought, okay, I'm going to hire a therapist, cost me $100 an hour, and they're going to fix me. Because I knew I was having all these dysfunctional relationships, and I knew that there was a better way to live. And I was like, I'm going to go get me some help, and you're going to make my life good. So that's what I did. And it was an amazing experience. And I went for about 8 years and it taught me a ton. But as a people pleaser, what happens is we get completely disassociated from the way that we feel, from our needs. And I was so disassociated by that point that I could not tell you if I was happy, sad, mad, glad. I couldn't put a name to it. I'd completely lost connection with my emotions. So they literally gave me a piece of paper with emojis, different expressions, and then there was a name under each emoji that described the emotion. So every morning I would go to my fridge and I would look at these emoji faces and I would go, that face, that's the one I'm feeling today. And that's how it started, was realizing, oh, this is a fallout of all this people-pleasing behavior. And that's when the wheels started to turn. But it took me so much longer to get rid of that. And I mean, I come from a broadcasting background like you do, not, you know, completely different genre, but from fashion and production. Well, I tell you, what better a job than to be on a set with different people all the time, just like my childhood. Hey, I'm the easygoing, happy-go-lucky, I'll please you and I'll do anything you ask of me. What better job to facilitate that than the job I ended up in, right? And putting on this front. I mean, it really was like a hand-in-glove marriage for my dysfunctional personality and making a living at it. But anyway, so it's an ongoing, and I still find myself saying or doing, but I have these cues inside now. I have these kind of, I feel it, you know, you can feel it, right? When it's about to come out your mouth, it's like, no, stop. And the second part, I think, of recovering from people pleasing is learning to set boundaries, because that's something else that we really do poorly. And boundaries can come out like barbed wire sometimes if we're not accustomed to setting them. That takes a while to grow into. But again, I have to say, get into your 50s, people, because this is where the magic is. I mean, you do get less and less concerned. I was going to say, you get less concerned about what other people think. You know what? That will never be true for me. But what I am getting better at is not substituting their opinions or their thoughts for my own. I'm trusting more and more in my own. That was a long answer. Did you want a long format answer? You just got one.
All good. This is all about you and your story, and I'm and it's just how things come up. And you know, you mentioned the fact that you feel it, and I think this is something that people go, well, what do you guys mean? What do you mean you feel it? And I think what's interesting is that, like, along my journey, I've realized that my body, not just my brain, will be telling me things. You know, like everyone talks about the brain and the body being separate. This is all one connected thing. And the more aware, the more practiced we become, we start to listen to how our body is telling us stuff, how we feel stuff. So, and I think that because of the fact that we are where we are in our age, we've got practice in being able to heal, to transform, to go through certain protocols where we start to learn that a sweaty palm means this, a beating heart or anxiety might mean this. The fear being present isn't, oh, I have to be scared. It's really, Nick, are you showing up for your best today? Are you doing a good 8-hour day at work or something? That's when fear really comes into my life, is when I, like, maybe I'm not working too hard, or I'm being a bit lazy. And then also like a tension in the neck and a pain in the gut. They're all, what I'm learning is that they're all here to kind of teach me something. So this is where when someone says feel it, this is what I'm saying, is really start to listen to your body. And I think that maybe through people's experiences, even if you might be younger than 50, you can start to learn the practice about how your body is trying to actually talk to you. Right?
Dude.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, let's start talking about how you've started to listen to your body and when did that start coming in? And I know you've been through a lot physically over the last couple of years too, so maybe start getting into that as well.
Yeah, and I was going to add, as I rudely interrupted, that I think every generation is getting smarter and faster at recognizing these things. I mean, I've run into 20-year-olds who are like, oh no, I listen to my gut and I get a stomach ache if I don't. I mean, what? How did you get this wisdom at this age? This is totally unfair. But
beautiful.
But thought, right? I mean, I'm thrilled because we need that. And Dr. Gabor Mate, who is totally one of my heroes, talks so much about the wisdom of the body. He's just like, the man is like a hero of mine. Anyway, your question, how did I start to listen to those signs? Well, in my former marriage, I had horrendous gastric problems because for me, it always shows up in the gut. Nervousness, anxiety, stress, anything, right? I mean, before I used to go on and do any kind of live radio or live TV, I'd be like, I honestly would want to just puke. And that was actually great training because it did teach me that I could override that because I had no choice. I had to show up for these little segments and be on. And it was actually great. Sorry, I'm going on a little bit of a wiggly tangent here, but okay. Later learned about special forces who also have to do that type of training where they literally shut down their adrenaline. They kind of shut the body cues off in order to function, right? But anyway, what happened in my first former marriage was I had all these intestinal issues. It's worse. I was doubled over in pain for days. I was vomiting. I would oscillate between constipation and diarrhea and everything in between, and just horrendous pain. And of course, they never found anything. I got poked and probed and jabbed and scanned and nothing. Well, I can't help but think that my body was trying to tell me, you need to listen to your gut. Whoa! You need to listen to your gut. And I didn't. And I was in the wrong relationship for over a decade. And I didn't listen and I didn't listen. And then it really came down to it. And I ended up changing my diet, which made a huge difference. I didn't eat wheat for like 10 years, massive difference for me. And it is not just it's not just about food, it's about the emotion, right? The whole body is an ecosystem that has to work in harmony. And when one of those things is out of harmony, everything starts to pay a price. So that was my first lesson in listening to my body and the consequences of not doing it. And then what happened is we went through our crazy crisis. You'll have to buy the book. It's a shameless plug. The book's called How to Wear a Silver Lining, and it's all the gory, ugly, horrible, sordid details. And what happened was my body was in a state of extreme stress for a year. We can't sustain that. And I ended up with cancer. And I'm not saying that the stress caused the cancer, but what we do know scientifically is that when the body is experiencing that much stress, that much cortisol, that it impacts the immune system. It lowers your immune system. My husband's trying to sneak in quietly and it's not working, is he?
Hi, Jason.
She's giving me that big Jason grin. Anyway, so the consequences of not knowing how to deal with the situation that we were in, and it was a situation like there is no playbook for the situation we were in. It was insane that all I could do was bring back my experiences in my first crisis and draw upon the determination that I developed to not let this stick. I'll tell you, cancer is an amazing, what's the word I want to use? It's an amazing community, because people will bend over backwards to help and to support and to be there. I mean, the outpouring of love that I received when I was going through treatment was unbelievable. And my treatment was, I'm a bit of a medical miracle, which may also be tied into, I don't know. I don't want to get too esoteric and woo-woo on you here, but maybe there's a correlation. Let me backtrack a little bit. My doctor is head of family medicine at one of the big hospitals in Toronto, in North York General. And I love this man so much. He's like this yoga practicing father of three who I've known for 20 odd years. He doesn't like to prescribe drugs. He likes to prescribe a more holistic approach to everything. Not that I have anything against medication, and neither does he. But he said to me, I don't know what this is, Rachel, when the first results came in. I don't know what this is, and I'm not calling to tell you there's anything wrong. How many doctors say that? I'm not calling to tell you there's anything wrong. I'm calling to tell you we need more information. Right there is a whole different approach. We got more information, and it was really shit news. And then I said, okay, at least it's only cancer. Because cancer has so many support mechanisms. They know how to treat cancer to the best of their ability. I mean, it's a well-oiled machine in the medical world, because unfortunately, so many of us will experience it in our lifetimes. And he said to me, once I had sort of done this little kind of Tony Robbins motivating myself speech, he said, you know what, Rachel, that is the attitude that is going to get you through this. And I turned out to be a medical miracle. So I don't know. I'll leave that for everybody else to decide. I mean, again, it comes back to that whole ecosystem, doesn't it?
Yeah, I definitely have heard a lot of stories around survival and healing, and and becoming cured, I suppose, from cancers or recovered. And in each case, everyone talks about how important the mental and spiritual aspect is, not just changing your diet or getting the proper medical advice and help and diagnoses, but actually how people carry themselves into, like you say, it's a crisis. But I'm going to go back now, because you mentioned the first crisis, and that was 10 years ago. What was that?
Now it was 20 years ago.
20 years ago then.
20 years ago. Wow. So I used to be married to a gambler who didn't know he was a gambler. I didn't know he was a gambler. And then one morning I went to work, my first job as a stylist, my very, very first agency job. I had just gotten signed to my agency, who's still my agent to this day. We've been through a lot, guys. My very first job, I show up to, and this is 2001, right? So we just had like the Motorola Razr, I think it was, or basic cell phones. Yeah. And I'm at the grocery store, and I hand the cashier, I'm buying Polaroid film. I hand the cashier a credit card, and she says, oh, I'm sorry, that's declined. Okay, so I whip out another one, and she says the same thing. And then I whip out the third one, which had almost no limit on it. And she said, I'm going to have to keep this. And she brings the scissors out and she cuts it up. I had no money. And I didn't know we had no money until I wrote about this in the book too, that again, the gritty details of it are all there. But basically, I felt like I just got sucked out of my body and was hanging over this situation where I knew that something explosive was about to hit my realization. And there was nothing I could do. And I discovered that we were $180,000 in debt. That from online gambling, which at the time was in its infancy, and there were no rules and regulations. There was nothing, right? You could just put your credit card on and away you go. So there was a point at which gamblers are really, really interesting, because as addicts, they have this mechanism in their brain that bypasses the "you should stop this" button, and they get such a high from the adrenaline that becomes their drug of choice. And when I tell this story, I don't want to vilify my ex. I have no hard feelings at all towards what happened. It was, like I say, another amazing gift in the end. It really gave me some great training ground for what was to come. The money was really hard to recover from, because everything has to change. Your lifestyle has to change immediately. You cannot go to the same grocery stores. You cannot go out for dinner with your friends. You cannot go to Starbucks to buy your coffee. And as a fashion stylist, I was shopping in charity shops. I had no money. I was selling CDs to try to make grocery money. But he was making a lot of money, and he managed to recover quite quickly. But the psychological impact of that was pretty vast. And also, he was at a place in his life where he really wasn't ready to confront his addiction and his behavior. And therefore, I became the scapegoat. Because I think that's a habit of a lot of addicts. And correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm stepping out of line here by saying that. But I feel like there's a process of healing. And part of that, before healing starts to take shape and take hold, there's a finger pointing process. It's your fault. It's their fault. It's my childhood's fault. It's my parents. am I off track when I say that, or is that fair?
Oh no, definitely. There's always it's not you. It's not me. It's a you problem. And I think that stems outside of the world of addiction as well. I think that's kind of goes into a lot of mental well-being, I don't want to say illness. But a lot of mental imbalances is the blame game. So for sure. And I see it a lot in a lot of people's lives. It's just inability to own up to the damages that we've caused. And that's why I think, for me, a 12-step program was so amazing, because it is part of the steps, making amends. But it's coming to terms with the fact that we've hurt people, and not a lot of people not a lot of people get into a place in their lives where they can say that I've hurt people. And and that is definitely a process of healing where you need to get to. So until people start to have a realization of the fact that, gambling, drug use, alcohol use are symptoms of basically abnormal fear and trauma. They're the byproduct of those things. So, and until somebody says, I need to heal, it's not the gambling that needs to go, it's the healing that needs to happen.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's interesting. When you talk about the ability that I think we develop an ability to say, to admit, to not get comfortable, but to own the fact that we have hurt people. It's inevitable. We are all victims of something. Therefore, all of us must have been an abuser at some point.
Yeah, I think that we can all get to those stages. And I think it's funny, I was just talking to the conversation with somebody here where I work from in Soho, that saying sorry is not easy for a lot of people. And I think it's because that we are taught that saying sorry is a sign of weakness and a sign of being wrong. And it's something that I'm learning, that as a new bonus dad, a new
Yeah.
parent, to children who are not biologically mine, that saying sorry to them when I've made a mistake is so darn powerful. And it's something that I don't think I could have done 7 or 8 years ago. I don't think I would have been able to be in that place of being saying sorry, because I just, again, I was taught that saying sorry means that I'm weak, that I'm showing weakness, that I can't be wrong. But the power in being able to say I'm sorry to someone, and not just say sorry, because sometimes sorries can just be blank words. Oh, I'm sorry I did that. Oh, I'm sorry. But the actual admission of I am sorry, I was wrong to have done that. And then the beautiful part is, how can I make this better?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And Rachel, I got to practice it the other day with the 6-year-old in my life. And he, 2 nights ago, he was playing with a shower head. And I said, don't play with the shower head. There's a whole bunch of moving parts in it. And they had all these like filter beads in it. I said, they'll go all, just don't play with it. But he's a boy and he's just kind of playing with it and unscrewing things. Anyway, it was put outside on the balcony and it was fine. And then I woke up in the morning and the beads in the shower head were everywhere. And and he was sitting on the couch, and I said, see, buddy, I told you not to play with that. Come help me pick them up. You've spilt all the beads. And he heard me say that you spilt all the beads. And he's like, no, I didn't. And I was like, yeah, you were playing with this. You shouldn't have been playing with it. And he came and he helped me with a tear in his eye. He came and helped me pick them up. And he still said, I didn't spill them. And I was like, it doesn't matter. I told you not to play with it. And then his mom came and said, Nick, I think I hit the shower head with the laundry dryer. I think I spilt the beans. And I said, well, it doesn't matter, Danny. I said, he wasn't meant to play with it. And she said, but Nick, he heard you say you spilt the beads. And he didn't. So I had to go, whoa. So the child doesn't understand that, yes, maybe he wasn't meant to be playing with that, but he didn't do what I told him he did. So I went to him and I said, okay, buddy, I said, I'm sorry. I owe you an apology. And he said, I don't care. And then wouldn't let me apologize. And I said, okay, well, listen, I owe you an apology. And when you would like to accept that, then I'd be ready. I would love to do that. And I went to the gym for an hour. And I came back and he heard the key in the door and he came running up to me with tears in his eyes. Geez, I cry every week with tears in his eyes, saying, Nick, I accept your apology. And he jumped up into my arms and I said, yes, Zach. I said, I'm really sorry. I was wrong to have said that to you, that you spilled the beads. You didn't. And I'm really sorry. I will try harder next time. And he just wiped away his tears and he said something really funny. He said, Nick, if I would have accepted your apology before you went out, would I have gotten a present?
Oh, bless him.
So
6-year-olds are amazing.
They're beautiful. They're all, he's beautiful. They're all beautiful. But I found that in my ability to tell, because I have this thing of reacting away, like in trauma, when they speak to their mom a certain way, or when they do something, I act exactly the way my dad taught me how to act, which is strict. Don't do this, don't do that, and expect them to actually listen. Because if I didn't listen, I would have got a cloud around the ear.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm expecting them to listen to me, not just hear me, but to listen and to do what but I'm forgetting, Rachel, that they're children with all of their own traumas. And I've just moved into their house, and I'm taking attention from their mom, and that we're on this, and I was telling this gentleman this morning, I said, we're on this journey of healing and becoming a unit, a family. And it's beautiful. And it's one that I'm learning all of the time through tension, through maybe some break in sleep patterns and some weird dreams, that I can do better. Awesome. And that's what I'm learning. Is the Maya Angelou, just do your best until you do better. And when you do better, do better.
Yeah,
and
when you
that,
do, yeah.
Yeah. So that's my story about apologies.
I love it. And I think what a beautiful gift that you gave to him by showing him that you can apologize. And you have modeled for him something really, really important, right? Because kids do not listen to what we say. They do what we do. They imitate. And if you are angry with a child, their brain is gone. Their brain is shut down. There's just, they're not home. You can't get through to them the more you raise your voice, right? It's just not going to happen. You know, it's funny because in my marriage now, we had a problem about apologizing, the royal we. If he was here, I know he would be able to admit to this. So I'm not speaking out of turn, honey, I promise. But he would, for example, he would lose his keys on a regular basis. And so if his were lost, he would take mine. And he took mine and then he would lose them. And there was a time where I needed to get to work and I couldn't find my car keys because he had taken them. And he had searched everywhere and I had searched everywhere and time was ticking. And I was getting more and more infuriated. And so I went and checked where he said he had looked because he's really bad at looking. Most men are for some reason. And I checked inside of his pockets and sure enough, there were my keys. So I, without saying a word, I grabbed the keys and I stormed into my car. And just as I was about to leave, he came up to the car window and he said, "I'm sorry." And I was like, well, that's a good start. I was livid because this is such an ongoing issue for us, right? He's like, "I'm sorry. I'm just so tired of up in front of you." That was what was holding him back. It was this idea that he was failing me so badly. That was what was stopping him from just saying, "I'm sorry." And I'm like, it's okay. You know how much relief there would be for the both of us if you could just say, "I'm sorry." And exactly as you pointed out a few minutes ago, it isn't just the words, it's the intention behind the words, it's the power behind it, it's the connection that you're making, it's looking someone in the eye and saying, "I'm really sorry. I hurt you and I would like to make it better." That's a whole different message than "sorry about that," right?
Yeah.
And also on the topic of apologies, it's so ironic that it's difficult for people to say, because when you get comfortable making a sincere apology, don't you find, Nick, that that's where your power is? Don't you find that that's like, whoa, that didn't feel bad and humbling and like I was wrong and shaming? That felt empowering and connecting and soothing, right? It actually delivers the opposite of what we are taught. And we grew up in a generation where, especially for men, you know, saying "I'm sorry."
Well, I think that
anybody practiced.
I think that like referencing the 12-step program again, you know, it is the 9th step as we make amends to people that we've harmed. And the 9th step is the step in the 12-step program where you become recovered. 10 and 11 and 12 are the maintenance steps, but 1 to 9 is the transformation. There's no, why is 9 the one where you transform? And I think that is because an amend means to change. Right. And in saying sorry, I was wrong to have done that. Here's the money that I owe you, or you know, here's whatever it is. I'm trying to fix whatever it is that I did to you. That's when we can start looking the world in the eye, because none of us go through this world without breaking a few eggs and stepping on a few toes. And I think it's just in our ability to be able to process it. But to get from 1 to 9 is a process in that 12-step program, and that's why I think that if anybody wants to do any more digging into that, then reach out. We can talk about it. But making amends is far more than just saying I'm sorry. And you're
Yeah.
right. It's almost, it sounds almost a selfish thing, because it really does help. Like when paying the money back, being selfish is actually helping build self-esteem, because a lot of people, especially in recovery, have a problem with self-esteem and very low self-esteem. And it's in these little acts of fixing things that we've done that we can start. The ninth step is where you can walk down the pavements and look the world in the eye.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that we kind of covered that. Rachel,
Yeah.
we're running out of time
Oh God, already? It's only
already.
been-
Yeah, but it's 45 minutes. But I want to quickly, as we wrap up, I want to go into the rescuer. Are you a rescuer? Have you been rescued? And how do you look at rescuing now?
I've definitely been a rescuer. I think it's the twin to people pleasing. It's all about love me, accept me. I want to fit in. But I am acutely aware, after living through the experiences that I've lived through, that I'm not just doing them a disservice, but myself a disservice. My relationships are founded on very different values and principles now, but that's healing and transformation is a messy business, and that did not come about easily. But I'll say this, I think that one of the most powerful and transformative things that we can do for ourselves is to learn to be first aware, and then to shift our self-talk. Our self-talk is critical to how we see ourselves, to how we see the world, to how we see other people. We think, what is it, like 90,000 thoughts a day, something like that, and 80% of them are negative. What? What? That's insane, Nick. That is insane. Why are we not learning how to rewire and manage that better and turn those 80,000 thoughts into 80% positive? I understand all about, we needed to think negatively. We needed to be on guard because, it helps us survive, but we're not living in that world anymore. So managing that self-talk, that's vast. That changes everything, including how we see ourselves as people pleasers or rescuers. So I like to think that I don't do that anymore. I think it's still, I have a hard time deciphering whether something is rescuing or just that's an act of kindness, right? Because now that I'm so aware of it, you can't not be aware of it. But then I have to go back to, how does it feel? How does it feel when these words are coming out of my mouth? Does it feel right? Does it feel comfortable? Does it feel genuine? And if there's a little bit of a knot in my stomach, or if there's a little bit of, my heart racing, zip it. So the mind-body connection for me has been something that went from being completely disassociated from to now getting more and more integrated every day. It's an ongoing process. We're a work in progress. I'm never going to figure this out completely, but we can do it together. Am I allowed to do any plugs here right now?
This is the wrap up. So let's, how can people get in touch with you, and how, plug away, plug books, plug whatever you need to plug.
So the book's coming out next year. It's called How to Wear a Silver Lining, and you can find a reflection of the messages in the book. I just started a new Instagram page for. If that's your jam, please follow me, because damn, I spend a lot of time on Canva making these pretty posts that I feel like nobody's ever gonna see.
They'll see them.
You can find me at R for Rachel, Lindley, Lindley, love R. Lindley Love. That's on the gram. And I think I'm gonna, you know what? Can we revisit another conversation about Go Mental some other time?
Oh, let's do another one. And we can do honestly, 45 minutes just flew by. I think let's schedule another talk with you about Go Mental.
Because that's a whole other kettle of fish. And because it's so fledgling right now, we're just doing some beta testing in the next couple of weeks. Some IRL with an actual audience, which is really exciting. But it's something that I think, yeah, we need another 45. So
okay, tell us when that works for you, and we'll put it in the diary.
Beauty. Thank you.
All right, Rachel, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time. Say hi to Jason and Ellery for me, and yeah, hopefully if you pop into London, let me know, and we'll arrange another coffee or lunch. It's been great chatting with you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, and farewell, everybody. Have an amazing week.
Beautiful. And just ping me those links and I'll put them in the Facebook feed too.
Brilliant. Thank you. That'd be great.
Okay. Thanks everybody for joining me and Rachel today. Really appreciate it. Next Facebook Live is going to be coming to you next Monday with a really cool dude. So I'll post the links for that. And don't forget to join me on Thursday for another Tough Through Tender conversation. Rachel, once again, thank you so much. And thanks everybody in the community. We'll see you later. Bye.
Thanks, guys.